Hi, this is Ralph Zuranski. I'm on the phone with Perry Marshall. He is considered the king of AdWords, of working on Google and generating income for his clients, and has written many courses to teach people how to gain the same success that he has in minimizing the amount of investment that people make in pay-per-click advertising to maximize the gain. How are you doing today, Perry?
I'm doing great. It's good to be on.
Well, thanks. The reason why I chose you to be one of the heroes is just your honesty, your integrity, and just your desire to provide quality service and products above and beyond the call of duty. So maybe you could explain a little bit more in detail what it is that you do.
Well, in a bigger picture, I'm a direct marketer. I help people sell at a distance or sell through media, which that's become a more and more important thing compared to decades ago or a century ago. Before telephone and television and radio and everything, all selling had to be done face to face. Or before the post office, it had to be hand delivered at best. But technology has brought about a whole completely different way of people doing business with each other. So, of course, now you can stick up a website, and anybody in the world can access it. And with tools like Google, you can pay them $5 and start advertising on their AdWords program, and people can find out about it almost instantly anywhere in the world. And so the communication tools that we have now are so incredibly powerful. It's really bewildering to people. So there's two aspects of that, and one is kind of the more technical aspect, which, that's constantly changing, but it's also something that you can usually hire somebody to do for you for not a huge amount of money. But the other aspect of it is how do you actually communicate this to people? How do you persuade people? And so I started out, when I hung out my shingle 4 years ago, I left a job that I was working at, and I started consulting, for the most part, salespeople on how to not do cold calls anymore, how to advertise in such a way that people come to them instead of them chasing the customer. Later that year, Google AdWords came out, and I became intrigued with it real quickly, and about a year later, I started publishing courses on it. But basically, AdWords is Google's advertising system where it's the right side of the page on a Google search where you see the little sponsored listings, and those ads are triggered by keywords, and the advertiser pays when a person clicks. And so that became a fascinating microcosm, and it's turned into a very, very important thing on the entire Internet. I think it's about, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's somewhere, it's a good, healthy, double-digit percentage of all Internet advertising. And so it's one of those things where you can lose your shirt if you don't know what you're doing, or you have enormous leverage if you do. So that's kind of a nutshell. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Yes, that's true. Well, you've met a lot of people on the Internet at the different conferences, and I particularly was impressed with just your quality and just your style and just your integrity. And I was curious, what is your definition of heroism?
Of heroism? Well, I guess it's doing the right thing regardless of the consequences, which suggests that there are principles that are above and beyond the immediate concerns of safety or expediency. Like if you usually the word hero refers to somebody saves somebody's life, or like Pearl Harbor, guys that helped other guys get out of the boat, and even though they got stuck there and drowned or whatever. That is what heroism is. And I think in today's business climate, there's there's a very pervasive culture in the marketing world that basically says whatever BS you have to make up to get the transaction done with is okay. And even a more subtle belief that, you know, truth itself is a very relative thing, and, you know, what's true for you is not true for me. And so what you end up with is you have a lot of people who really don't have any appreciation for the golden rule, or they don't really treat customers the way they would want to be treated. And you know, and it makes people cynical. It makes people mistrusting. And so now what every marketer has to overcome, I think the biggest factor that anybody in the marketing profession deals with, the most pervasive thing, is cynicism and distrust. You know, whenever it was 30 years ago, you know, got all this stuff about Deep Throat in the news lately. Well, you know, 30 years ago, Richard Nixon lied to the American public, and everybody was just shocked, you know. Mm-hmm. And now, you know, you got Bill Clinton lying about the Lewinsky thing. You've got the Bush administration obviously fabricating things to get us in the Iraqi war. And I'm not going to get into the politics of any of this, but I'm just going to comment that, you know, nobody's particularly shocked or surprised today that somebody's lying to them. And so it creates this cynicism inflation in the world that it just becomes harder to overcome. And if you make things up if you make things up and couch them in very believable language in order to overcome somebody's skepticism, then when they find out the truth, all you've done is you've contributed to cynicism inflation, and you've made it harder for them to believe anything you say later. Now, on the other hand, if you are exceptionally truthful about things, your customers over time will discover that is true of you, and they will believe you when they don't believe others. And so that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but I think it's really important, and it's interesting you're asking me all this stuff because these topics rarely come up. Everybody wants to talk about tricks and techniques and clever ways of saying things and clever ways of getting internet traffic or, you know, whatever. But, you know, let's talk about, you know, some really simple things here. That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, it's important to know who people are and what they actually believe. That's one of the reasons for the Heroes program. The people that I'm interviewing is that people can learn a great deal when you hear the people that are trying to market you stuff answer questions that have real depth and meaning. And so the next question I wanted to ask you is, did you ever create a secret hero in your mind that helped you deal with life's difficulties?
That's a great question. It triggers all kinds of possible answers. I think everybody has, I don't know if the word is alter egos, sort of people you envision in your mind, like, well, what would this guy do, or what would that lady do, or whatever. I think, you know, in the midst of all this chaos, it's kind of interesting that people wear a little armband that says WWJD, what would Jesus do? Now, I think, you know, truth be told, the average person doesn't have a huge amount of knowledge about Jesus, but even people who are have only a passing familiarity with Jesus sort of somehow intuitively know that he was a guy that would not advocate violence, somebody who would advocate honesty, somebody who would sacrifice, who would be a hero, who would sacrifice the immediate safety or convenience for a larger purpose, which of course, that's really what the whole Jesus story is about. And so, yeah, certainly for me, Jesus is in the forefront of my mind when I think about things like that. But I think there's other things too. I was thinking not too long ago. My dad died about almost 20 years ago. But when I was a teenager, my parents went through a horrendous period in their marriage. My mom had a psychiatric disorder, and it caused her to behave very, very strangely. Anybody who's had like a person with a psychiatric problem living at home would relate to this.
I can relate.
It can be very weird, very very stressful.
Oh, it's scary sometimes.
And I remember me and my brother and sister we're having this little powwow with Dad, and we're going, Dad, I think you should just take off. I think you should leave her and her silly perception of what's going on and go have a real life or something. And he steadfastly refused to do that. He said, nope. I stood up in front of a whole bunch of people, and I promised, God and everybody that I would stick to her till death do us part, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Because when you make a promise, you keep it.
Wow.
When things like that happen at the time, it's like, well, okay, I guess Mom and Dad are going to, grind through this, which, more grind, yeehaw. But later, much later, like when I got in college, I majored in electrical engineering, and it didn't take me too long to figure out that I was on a very, very steep learning curve. It was hard. And, the first couple years of the freshman and sophomore classes were weed-out classes where 40, 50, 60% of the class would fail.
Wow.
And you'd stay up all night long just trying to get a C, not to mention a B or an A. And on top of that, this was really rudimentary stuff, calculus and all this, and I didn't really find much of it particularly interesting either. And I mean, really, it didn't get interesting till my junior and senior year. It was just a big grind, and I wanted to quit. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I didn't. There was some part of me that would not give myself permission to go do something easier. Mm-hmm. Because deep down, I knew that I really belonged there. I really needed to master this stuff, and I needed to get the hard stuff out of the way so I could do the fun stuff later. But you had to master the basics before you could do the more creative things. Mm-hmm. And I think my dad's persistence in the face of adversity probably has a lot to do with me sticking it through. And today I'm very glad. Mm-hmm. Because now I am doing really what I was thinking at the time when I was in college is I'd much rather be majoring in English or something. Mm-hmm. Because that stuff came a lot easier to me than the math and the science did. I was very interested in math and science. I had some very specific reasons why I was there. But it just did not come as naturally to me as writing papers and all this kind of stuff, which I thought was a lot more fun. Mm-hmm. But I stuck with it. Well, now, I don't spend most of my time doing math problems. I spend most of my time writing copy and being a communicator and really operating in my talent zone. But one of the reasons that I'm good at what I do as an internet marketer is I develop the analytical side. And I'm very thankful today that I ground through all that stuff because, see, I can pick up a physics journal or an engineering journal or a math book or something like that, and I understand it. I understand what it's talking about, and some of my marketing stuff gets me into more advanced mathematics, like the Taguchi method and stuff like that. And it's really nice when you've got something under your belt and you've mastered it, and you don't use it every day, but when you do need to use it, it's there. From a business perspective, it's something that differentiates me from others who do what I do, who maybe don't have that analytical capacity. Mm-hmm. And so, really, I mean, again, another long answer to a short question, but I think at the root of everybody's life is certain principles and values that you either believe in or don't believe in, and ascribe to or don't. And they definitely affect everything else you do, but most people never directly see those, and most people never ask about them or talk about them, but they're there.
Yeah, well, I agree. Your dad gave you a great example of what true commitment and being a person of your word, which is so critical to have any integrity in the businesses that you're involved in. That seems to be one of the major considerations that I had when I chose people who I thought were heroes, were their integrity. Do you believe that there are certain principles that people should be willing to sacrifice their lives for?
Yeah, I do. The first thing, it's interesting. It's very interesting you would ask me that question, because just last night my wife and I went to a play, and I think it was called Big Time. I don't remember the author. I'm sure it's kind of obscure, but what it was about this guy who works on Wall Street, and he's got the big office, and he works in the big company, and everybody kind of, the world bends to his will, because he's wealthy and powerful. It's like a 30-something, kind of a young, successful guy, right?
Uh-huh.
And all the characters in the play are kind of in this category, and they're all living this kind of shallow existence, and they're all kind of petty, and he has these fights with his girlfriend and everything, and it kind of shows this pettiness, because like if he doesn't get his way, he's telling her she's a loser. Like he breaks up with his girlfriend finally, or she decides that she is not sure about him and not sure they want to get married, and she tells him that, and he bursts out in this tirade about what a loser she is, and if she wasn't such a loser, she'd realize how important he is and how much he's helping her and all this kind of stuff. And I'm watching this. It's like, this is like proof positive that she shouldn't be with the guy.
Yeah.
And proof positive that he obviously doesn't love her at all, because if you love somebody, you don't call him a loser and treat him that way. Well, in the story, in this play, he has dealings with a minister of finance from some country in South America, and this country's in turmoil. And, of course, it's a big deal, and there's a lot of money involved, and, of course, the implication is this is all tainted money that was probably stolen from poor people, and it's all corrupt government slush fund stuff. But, of course, he doesn't really care about that. But he goes down to this country, I think it's like Venezuela or something, and he goes down there to meet with this guy, and in the middle of his meeting, the government caves in.
Wow.
And one of the like rebels who helped overthrow the government, he kidnaps the guy, and the guy is in this room, and the guy that kidnapped him is he's wearing this kind of military uniform, and he's pacing back and forth, and you get this, young businessman dude in his shirt and tie in some, concrete cell in Venezuela. And the guy who kidnapped him actually went to school in the U.S. and is probably a lot smarter and more educated than most people would assume. Okay, and this rebel, had his reasons for being part of a group that overthrew the government, because the government was corrupt and they were oppressing people and all this kind of stuff. And the rebel asked the guy's name was Paul. He says, "Paul, I have a question for you." He says, "I'm fighting for my people. I'm fighting for freedom. I'm fighting for what I believe is right, and I'm willing to die for it." He says, "Is there anything you're willing to die for?" And he just stares back at him like he's speaking gibberish. And he repeats, he says, "Is there anything you would die for?" And he just looks at him again, like, you're kind of thinking, well, he came down here to do a financial deal. What is his life really all about? And he goes, "I said, all I want to know is there anything you'd be willing to die for?" And he goes, "No." And that was like, I think that line was the point of the whole movie. That if there wasn't anything that you would die for, if there wasn't anything you'd sacrifice for, it's because you believe that you are the center of the universe. And that everything is supposed to revolve around you. Which is why everybody in this play acts like the world revolves around them, which is why nobody can get along with each other, because there's no sense of higher purpose, there's no sense of honor, there's no sense of decency, there's just me, 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 me. Okay? The only reason we live in a free country is because people paid with their lives believing that the freedom of their children, the future of their country was more important than they themselves were.
Boy, that's so true. That's so true. I think that a lot of people don't ever get to that point where they think of what would I die for, or even the more important question, what would I live for, until they've experienced the lowest point in their life. What was the lowest point in your life, and how did you change your life path to win a victory over those obstacles?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing that I think of, everybody has different hard spots in their life, and they're always hard for different reasons, and a lot of times you can't really compare one to the other. But I remember when my dad died when I was 17, and that was about a 3-year process of fighting cancer and the emotional roller coaster. Dad's going to be okay, Dad's not going to be okay, Dad's going to be okay, Dad's, all that stuff. And
I'm going through that now.
Most people by the time they're, well into adulthood have probably experienced that with somebody. I remember being really upset about that. I remember having this conversation with my mom where I said, well, I guess God gave me a dad, and if God's going to take my dad away, then God can do that. Then I think back a little later. This would have been about a month after my dad died. I was a senior in high school, and I was taking this class, and we had this interesting assignment to write a philosophy of life. And by virtue of having been through the ringer with this, I had given those questions a lot more thought than probably most kids do at that age. And I hope I remember this correctly. I wrote down 3 things, and I turned this in. I said, yeah, now I remember what it was. I said, nothing is worth living for unless it's worth dying for, because to live for something is to spend time which you cannot get back in pursuit of it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty profound.
That was the first thing, which, none of this stuff, I didn't make up any of this stuff myself. I got it all from other people.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first one. The second one was, I believe that the difficult things that you deal with in life will make you a stronger, better person, but only if you let them.
Mm-hmm.
That was the second one. The third one was a modification of, actually, I'm not completely sure where it comes from. I had read it in Henry David Thoreau, but I think it comes from the Westminster Confession. It said, I believe that the chief end of man is to glorify God and live with Him forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so those 3 things, that was my philosophy of life at age 17, and
wow.
I'm not sure I would change that now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But being forced to confront a lot of hard issues, I think that's the only way you really kind of figure out what's important and what's not.
Uh-huh. So you feel it's really, really important to have a positive view of setbacks, misfortunes, and mistakes?
It's very important. I mean, it's really one of these deals where you can have it either way. And which way do you want it? I mean, do you want to look at your tragedy in life like life sucks, then you die, it's all meaningless? I mean, there are a lot of people that do.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of people, they look at life exactly that way.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually resent people who don't.
No, I agree. There are
I can't remember exactly how this quote goes, but it's something like, people who dance are considered crazy by those who can't hear the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really kind of like that. It's like,
mm-hmm.
Is tragedy just tragedy? Is that all that it is? Or is there music somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Is there purpose going on somewhere? And so, this really gets into the whole, really the deepest aspects of what your philosophy of life really is.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all very religious questions.
Yeah.
I think, we have this sort of taboo in Western society that, you're not really supposed to discuss all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, the fact is, everybody's going to have to wrestle with it sometime or another, and when they do, they're either going to be equipped to deal with it because they've been discussing it,
mm-hmm.
or it's going to blindside them and they're going to be forced into this whole new train of thought that,
mm-hmm.
They never learned about in school. They never, nobody was supposed to talk about it in a polite company.
Yeah.
And they end up going through it alone, which, doesn't that make a person all the more cynical,
mm-hmm.
If they think that,
yeah.
life sucks, then you die. So,
Well, do you think that it's important to have a dream or vision that sets the course of your life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, when you talk about dreams and visions and stuff, sometimes I think you can sort of trivialize it like you know, what's your dream? Well, my dream is to drive a Mercedes, you know, or some such thing. Well, you know, I hope your dream for your life is bigger than that. And I don't mean more expensive either. I mean more substantive. But you know, even in the mundane sense, it always helps if you know what you're working for. You know, and when I was a kid, it always helped if I knew why I was doing the paper route.
Yeah.
It never was enough to just, well, you know, I'm saving up some money for someday.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you think that it takes courage to pursue new ideas? It seems that in everybody's lives, everybody's comfortable with the way that you are, and if you start changing, then all of a sudden they either have to reject you or they have to change also.
Well, you know, I think courage is really the king of all virtues. You know, if you said, you know, what are the greatest virtues, you could talk about love and honor and trust and all this kind of stuff, but none of those things really have any dimension to them unless you have the courage to pursue them. And it always takes courage to do it. You're always at odds with most of the rest of the world when you embrace virtue. It's always easier to fudge a little bit. It's always easier to make it up. It's all, you know.
Yep.
You know, I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect in any of those regards, but you know, what I can be is aware.
Yeah.
You know, or if somebody calls it to my attention, hey, you said you would do this, but you never did. Well, then I need, well, you're right. Let's fix that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing that everybody experiences, I don't think there's anybody that does not, is doubts and fears. A lot of people fear injury, they fear failure, they fear rejection. Some people even fear success. How do you overcome your doubts and fears?
Well, it's a funny thing, I've kind of figured out over a long period of time that when I feel trepidation about something I'm planning to do, it's usually because it's important. You know, you usually don't feel fear about doing trivial things. You know, sometimes people don't even feel fear about, you know, getting on a motorcycle and going 100 miles an hour. You know, but you know, like I have how could I put this? I know somebody who got in a very compromising sexual situation with somebody, and it happened years ago, and it was just kind of sitting there, simmering under the surface. Nobody knew about it. It was she was having to deal with this all the time, but it was too taboo to really bring up. And finally, she was talking to my wife and I about this, and we said, you know what? You need to talk to the other person about it, and you need to confront them about what happened. This was, you know, this is something you'd categorize as abusive, okay?
Yeah.
She being the victim, and, you know, she was afraid of wrecking the other person's life, which, you know, if you think about it, there is something kind of honorable about that, because even though the other person had hurt her very deeply, she was still concerned for his well-being. And it was like, you know what? You cannot keep trying to sweep this under the rug. it will not get better until you deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, eventually she did, and it took an enormous amount of courage to bring it up, but that opened the door to making the situation something they could deal with, and to begin to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that are really scary.
Yeah, I agree.
But again, the fact that it is scary tells you that it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever it might be, and a lot of times it's things that are a whole lot less onerous than that.
Yeah.
It takes courage to go take out a small business loan and hang out your shingle.
Mm-hmm.
You know that the odds are stacked against you.
Yeah.
You could fail. One of the things I learned when I was in my 20s was, if I fail, if I get rejection, if people say no, if they don't take me up on my proposal, if I get an F in a class and have to retake it over,
mm-hmm.
guess what? It's not the end of the world.
Isn't that true?
Life did not come to a screeching halt when I flunked this test.
Yeah.
Life did not grind to a screeching halt when I flunked the class and had to retake it over. And it didn't make me a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
It just means I didn't make it that time.
Yeah.
And so, really successful people of any stripe learn to look at failure as it's a corrective force in your life. It's something that it's something that kind of shakes the slag and the garbage off of you and weeds out the trivial stuff and focuses you on what's important, and eventually you figure out the formula.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that you would say that and tell that story about that lady, because there's always a question as far as the importance of forgiveness of those who upset, offend, and oppose us. And on the opposite side of that, there's accountability, people that do offend us. Where do you think is the balance between having people be accountable for the bad things that they do or the wrong things and actually forgiving them for the things that they did to you personally?
Well, that's a really great question, and I think it's important. It's more important than it might sound on the surface, because every one of us has people that we have forgiveness issues with. Okay? Every one of us has done things to other people that were wrong and that we need to be forgiven for. But that doesn't really help very much until we realize that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just live in denial that you've gone your whole life and as though you've never ever hurt anybody or never done anybody wrong, because
mm-hmm.
all of us have.
Yeah.
And on the other side, all of us have little grudges, or sometimes big grudges, that we hold against other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can be healthy when you're walking around with that. I think it's impossible.
I do too.
I think if the truth be known, everybody talks about, does this, if you eat peanut butter and the peanut butter the peanuts had insecticide on them or something, are you going to get cancer, or does this cause cancer, does that cause cancer, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be willing to bet you every penny I've got that things like anger and grudges and stuff like that cause more diseases and more, mental health problems and more things that cost us all time and money,
mm-hmm.
Than any of those other things.
Oh, I believe that's true.
Or like I got a friend who's a minister. He likes to say, there's a lot of churches where the pastor or whoever running the church, he'd be if they caught him smoking a cigarette, they'd throw him out in a heartbeat.
Uh-huh.
Like, well, that's really evil. Well, if you smoke cigarettes, you're really bad. But he bickers with people, and he fights with people, and he spreads rumors about people, and he has these little fiefdoms and wars, and they never throw him out for that. It's like, which is really worse?
Uh-huh.
I'd rather live with a smoker who's at peace with themselves than a non-smoker who's contentious. How about you?
Oh, I agree. I agree.
So there's all these things that are like, they're all surface level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, everybody's got to deal with that stuff, and I think, if you say, is there anybody you need to forgive, all of us can think of somebody that we need to, that we only partially did, or maybe we didn't at all, or we're still swearing we're going to get even with them, You just got to let go of that. Now, this came up in a discussion. I interviewed one of my customers, and he told a really interesting story. He had a guy he worked at some company that was one of his vendors, and he kind of knew this guy, but not very well, and the guy kind of disappeared. Like, you just sort of assume that, that he got a different job or something. Well, it turns out what actually happened was he molested a child or something like that. He was a sex offender.
Wow.
And he went to jail. And he was in jail for 3 years. And then they let him out. And he had a probation officer, and he had this thing around his leg, where, like, he's got to come to the office and plug it in, and like, it's so the probation officer knows where this guy is 24/7. He's under constant surveillance, basically. So it's like, okay, you got 20 minutes to drive home. And you got to go home and plug the thing in.
Wow.
You got an hour and a half on Saturday afternoon to go to the bank and go grocery shopping, and then you got to be home. Like, just like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, so he comes to see John one day, and he says, "Hey, John," and he kind of tells him his story. I knew you way back when, and I was working at this company, and then I got in trouble, and I lost my family. My wife divorced me. I lost my job. I went to jail. My entire life fell apart. John, would you give me a job? Ooh. Ooh. Well, John hired him. John gave him a job. And then John got to know the probation officer, and he ended up hiring another guy, too. Now he's got 2 of these guys working in his company.
Wow.
And John was raving about this guy both of them, because he said, these guys, they always show up on time. Every single day. They work very hard. I actually do not have to pay them as much as I would have to pay other people, because frankly they can't get a job anywhere else. They're thankful for what they got.
Yeah.
And he says they'll run through walls for me because they're so appreciative of me giving them a chance. If I give them a problem to solve, they figure out how to solve it. These guys are great employees. Okay? And this is a strategy for finding an employee. Now, obviously, John does not run a daycare. There aren't any kids or anything that work there, so that's not an issue. But this was a strategy for, getting an employee, and we all know that good employees are hard to find.
That's true.
Work ethic and everything, it's not easy. So I interviewed John, and John told this whole story on one of my CDs and to my subscribers, and I got this angry email from this guy, and he goes, "I can't believe that you're advocating that we take these criminals and give them a job and all this kind of stuff." And I said, I can only give you my opinion. I said, first of all, the information you get from me, it's a cafeteria, and you can take it or leave it. Not every idea applies to you, but I said, here's how I look at this. I said, these guys did go to jail, and as far as society is concerned, you know, we live in a democracy, we have laws, the laws got there by a democratic process, and our society has decided that they paid the price they're supposed to pay. Mm-hmm. And these guys are still under probation, mm-hmm. and I said, you know, the Lord's Prayer says, forgive others as we forgive those who do bad things to us. Uh-huh. I said, my obligation, if a person has, you know, done their penance to society, and if they want to be forgiven, my obligation is to forgive them.
How true is that?
Doesn't mean that I have them run my daycare, yeah. or that I do anything stupid like that. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's a two-sided coin, because all of us have bones in our closet. All of us have things we're not ashamed of, and we all hope that other people will give us some slack.
Yeah.
And so we have to give other people slack too. It doesn't mean you be stupid.
Yeah.
You know, I had a tenant steal from me. Okay, well, we evicted her. You know, and she was sorry, and she apologized, and she cried, and all that stuff. And we said, well, we forgive you, and you need to find a new place to live. Mm-hmm. Because I did not think it was appropriate to not have a consequence. Mm-hmm. She needed to learn, like, it took us a while to figure it out. It had become a pattern, mm-hmm. which almost always there is.
Yeah.
You know, there's never just one cockroach. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean there's not consequences. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I'm not sitting here, well, I did forgive her. I'm not angry at her, or, mm-hmm. you know, she never actually even paid us back. Well, you know, I'm not going to go after her. That's just going to be unnecessary time and money and headache, you know. So,
well, that's always the question that people end up facing, is that it's easy to forgive somebody, you know, if they offended us or stole from us, rather. The harder part is to call them to accountability and make sure that they realize that there are consequences for their wrong actions.
Right. And there are consequences. And, you know, consequences are the only way people ever learn to straighten themselves out. Mm-hmm. You know, if somebody's coming to work drunk every day, you better make sure there's some consequences, because the problem ain't going to solve itself.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of times the most loving thing you can do with somebody is have a harsh consequence.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And that's the reality of living in a imperfect world.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the true definition of love, is when somebody's going down the wrong path, to actually try and steer them to a better path, or just show them or try to help them find a better path.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you remember Jerry Garcia?
Sure.
The guitarist for the Grateful Dead? I listened to an interview with his drummer, Mickey Hart, the drummer for the Grateful Dead, and some guy called in, it was like on a radio show, some guy called in and he says, hey, how come you didn't keep Jerry from overdosing on drugs? And he goes, dude, have you ever had a friend who had a drug problem? Mm-hmm. Have you ever tried to get him to stop? Mm-hmm. It's not like we didn't try.
Yeah.
It's like Jerry did what Jerry was going to do. Mm-hmm. You know, who knows what they did to try to stop it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But obviously it didn't work.
Sure.
Obviously the consequences at some point along the way were not bad enough.
Yeah.
And if the consequences had been worse, when it was a less onerous problem, mm-hmm. Jerry Garcia would still be alive, and he'd still be doing Grateful Dead concerts, you know? So, what can you say?
Yeah, well, you can just do your best and just leave it in God's hands, because there's only so far that you can go, and mm-hmm. realize that when you try to help people that are going down the wrong path, the first thing they're going to do is hate you and blame you, and it takes a tremendous love for that person to be willing to accept their anger and accept that abuse.
Yes, and you know, I'll even go further, and I'll say that most people with a big problem blame the problem on the solution.
Can you explain that?
Well, this is kind of hypothetical, but if some guy's got an alcohol problem and his wife tells him he needs to get help, he's probably going to tell her that the reason he drinks is because of her.
That's true. Yep. Shifting the blame, yep.
And it's like the truth is she's the one that loves him the most of anybody in the world, which is exactly why she's telling him to get help.
Yeah.
Which, and because she's telling him and nobody else is, he's mad at her. I mean, he might be really, really, really angry at her, And really, if you're not willing to deal with the consequences, what can you blame?
Yeah.
But the solution.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Yep. Well, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And I think that the answer and one of the big solutions is just serving others. And do you experience service to others as a source of joy?
Yes. Absolutely. About 6 years ago, my wife's brother at the time, he lived in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and we went down to visit him. He'd lived there for a long time, and we'd never gotten down to, it's expensive to travel and everything, but we scraped together the money and we went, and he had this friend named Paulo who took me and her to the slums of Sao Paulo. And this was like kind of shocking. Okay, we have nothing like that kind of poverty in the U.S. I mean, after I came back from Brazil, it was like, man, Bill Clinton is an honest president, and we don't have any pollution, and we don't have any poor people, and we don't have any violence. I mean, I could truthfully tell you that the best, aside from like a gated community, with the exception of that, the best neighborhood in Sao Paulo, Brazil, is more dangerous than the worst neighborhood in Chicago.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
And it gets worse from there, okay? And so Paulo took us, he knew his way around, and he knew where he could go and where he couldn't, and, so we kind of trusted him. So he took us around, and we met all these people, and we saw how these people live. And kind of decided, that was a real, it made us very thankful for what we have, and he had he had this program where he was helping kids get off the streets, or keeping kids from getting on the streets in the first place, and we kind of helped him out, and we kind of decided, whenever we get a chance, we're gonna go see how the other half lives, and and because of that, in the meanwhile, I've been to Mozambique, which is the 18th poorest country in the world. I've been to Nairobi, Kenya. I saw a bunch of AIDS orphans. This was actually last fall. And in various different ways, we've been able to help people in those kind of circumstances, and that's a whole lot more fulfilling than driving a new car off a parking lot. Because when you do that, you're honoring the fact that some things are more important than my little agenda, and you're getting outside of yourself. When you spend a day meeting kids or parents who are dying of AIDS.
Yeah.
You know, you don't come home and go, my latte's too foamy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it totally gives you a different point of view. You know,
yeah.
and you know, here in my daily life, you know, if my kids are sick, I take them to the doctor. We don't really spare any expense to fix those problems, but you know, when you get reminded every now and then that not everybody has that luxury.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I met a 7-year-old boy who was dying of AIDS for lack of a $1 bus ticket to go get a free shot.
Mm.
And he was already, you know, too far down the road to be helped.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm not going to try to describe to you what he looked like or, you know, what it was like.
Yeah.
You know, suffice it to say, it was very sad.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can do things about that.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I kind of, you know, if I had a wish, you know, I don't know how many wishes a person can get, but if I had a few, one of them would be for every person who can afford, like every person in America, or every person in a, you know, a nice modern country who can afford to take a nice vacation, to go to Africa just once.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a place like Nairobi or someplace like that,
mm-hmm.
and see how other people live, and just spend a little bit of time thinking about, okay, what can we do about this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people need medical skills, education, training, business skills, you know, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, well, we have things, not just money, but, you know, skills and helping hands and,
mm-hmm.
you know, what could people do? You know, if people did that, it would solve those problems.
Yeah.
We'd live in a much better world. And, you know, people are very slowly solving those problems, but it sure would be nice to see them get solved faster.
Mm-hmm. That's so definitely true. Well, what power does prayer have in your life?
Well, I think it's one of my core disciplines. I mean, I think it's one of the most important things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, most of the time, I think the biggest role that prayer plays is it's not so much getting what you want or having you know, some wish granted or whatever, but it's more like aligning. It's saying, well, God, I don't know what you want me today, but I'm gonna, to the best of my ability, I'm gonna align myself with that,
mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna try to follow where I'm led.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you know, there have been a handful of situations where I wouldn't know any other way to describe what happened other than to say a miracle happened.
Mm-hmm.
Not often, few and far between, but, you know, like I've got this friend in Ohio named Jerry, and she had lupus for years.
Mm-hmm.
And she did all the stuff you do, and I don't have time to go into all the details, but basically one day somebody prayed for her and it like went away, gone.
Wow.
Never to come back.
Mm.
And if you look up lupus is not, you know, this is sudden. This wasn't like over a period of 3 months or something. It just totally went away. You look up lupus is not one of those things like lupus and cure do not normally go together in the same sentence.
That's true.
And so, yeah, you know, sometimes things do happen. So I don't think, there's certainly no question in my mind that, you know, prayer changes things. Mm-hmm. But the thing that changes the most is me. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I'm the one that needs to get changed.
Well, sanctification is a long process.
Yep.
Salvation comes as a free gift, but sanctification is much harder and it takes a lifetime. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
That's why it's important to have a sense of humor in the face of serious problems. Do you have a sense of humor?
Yeah. I get a friend, he says, my purpose in life is to make God laugh.
Uh-huh.
That's his little thing, and I'm quite sure God has quite a sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
See it every day.
Yeah. Well, who are the heroes in your life, Perry?
Oh boy, that's a hard question to answer because I think I'm old enough to realize that nobody's perfect. It seems like most of the people that have influenced my life in extraordinary ways also have extraordinary weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you meet a person with really great strengths; they've almost always got really big weaknesses to go along with them.
That's true.
I don't know, like people that I know or people that are alive today. I don't know if I would categorize them as heroes, but I will say that I could certainly. It'd be interesting to do actually. Is make a top 10 list of the most influential people in my life,
mm-hmm.
which would be various different ways or disciplines or skills or
mm-hmm.
spheres of life. And I guess
Who would be those people that have had that major positive impact on your life? I know your dad would definitely be one.
My dad would definitely be on the list. One guy that would be on the list would be a professor who pulled me aside. He was an English professor, actually, when I was in college. His name was Dr. Knoll, and he pulled me aside one day, and he says, I've been reading your papers, and I'd kind of like to talk to you sometime. Why don't you come visit me in my office? And I did a few weeks later, and he starts telling me all this stuff that he'd figured out from reading the stuff that I write that I hadn't figured out about myself. It was amazing. I mean, he saw way further down the road than I ever did, and he was a really great teacher too. He would definitely be on the list. I think there's different people affect your life in different ways. For example, this would be kind of a weird example, and it's certainly not like life hero would definitely not be the right idea here. But for example, when was this? This would have been about 7 or 8 years ago. I went to a Rush concert. Rush is a rock band,
uh-huh.
and it was 3 hours of the most extraordinarily executed musical performance that I had ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And the drummer was I think the drummer stole the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never seen musicianship like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the musical arena, that guy, definitely a hero. Definitely influenced. It sort of changed my awareness of music.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely big influence in my business life is Dan Kennedy. I first heard Dan Kennedy speak in 1997, and he coaxed $300 out of my pocket, and I bought his, some of his books and tapes,
yeah,
and it transformed my understanding of sales and marketing. Now,
mm-hmm.
I actually know Dan pretty well now. I'm in one of his coaching groups, and
mm-hmm.
I talk to him every month and everything. Now, is Dan like a hero of my whole life? No.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a luminary in business.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say about, when there's people like that, and you encounter, people who change the way you think about things, people that influence you that way, a lot of times it's worthwhile to go dig all the water out of that well that you can. You don't just skim it from the surface. And so like with Dan, I was just at a meeting, a group meeting for 2 days with Dan last week. Okay, well, why do I go to that? Because Dan consistently brings insights into situations that I would not come up with myself. And it continues to happen. Now, I guess if the time came where I wasn't really getting anything new that I hadn't already gotten, then I would stop. But, as long as you can continue to learn something new, you keep going back. We had a discussion about one topic that was very illuminating that nobody else in the room had really fully considered. And so, there's, other people, I don't know, I'd have to sit down and think about this, but you get the idea. There's always people, or, authors, people that you may never meet, very influential thinkers, or, if you're in a certain discipline, like any direct marketer has been enormously influenced by Claude Hopkins, whether they read his stuff or not. But, it would be a very good idea for anybody in marketing to read Claude Hopkins because, he's one of those true luminaries. He's, when somebody's one of the really first people to figure a whole bunch of things out, it probably means they're brilliantly smart. And that what they tell you about other things is equally valuable. So,
well, why do you think heroes are so important in the lives of young people?
Well, I think everybody's going to have heroes one way or the other. It's just a question of whether they're good ones or bad ones.
Yeah.
Like if some basketball player thinks he's not a role model, he's sadly mistaken. At any given time, there's thousands of guys that are shooting hoops, dreaming of being an NBA basketball player, and a few of them actually make it. Well, how many of them are consciously aware of the fact that there's another part of their job description that they never really thought about? No, you don't just play basketball. You live a certain way, and kids want to be like you. That's an important part of the job. And is that basketball player going to influence them to be more responsible, to be a better citizen? Or does he think that he's only teaching them how to shoot hoops? Like the other day, somebody sent me a link to a website where the guy had made his website look exactly like mine.
Really?
Yeah, like it wasn't a copy, but it was like the format, the colors, the layout, the writing style, everything was exactly like mine. Okay? Now, I don't think he crossed any legal boundaries or anything. And I guess I'm sort of flattered by that, I suppose. I hope it, I hope it works for him. But the point is, like it or not, I am obviously a role model for other people.
Yeah.
And anybody in a public sphere is.
That's so true.
And so that means that how I conduct myself in public is more important than I'd like to think, and that I'm teaching people simply through my actions at any given time, whether I realize it or not, because I'm in the public eye.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary, because I have to freely admit that I don't always, you got to be, got to be careful about zinging off some email to somebody, that, they're upset with me, so I'm going to be upset back and be belligerent or something, or whatever. This just adds to the negativity.
No, I agree with that. Well, do you think there's any heroes in our society today that aren't getting the recognition that they deserve?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You know what? What I think of when you said that, I was in Mozambique 2 years ago in this very poor village, and there was this lady named Robin. Her name was Robin Perry. No pure coincidence. My first name is Perry, no relation or anything. Her name was Robin Perry, and she was, I don't know, about 55, 60 years old. She and her husband were retired, and they decided to spend their retirement years helping very poor people in very poor countries, including Mozambique. And so for a couple of days, I just followed Robin around. And so I'm just trailing along behind her. She marches into a village with a box of medicine under her arm, and she goes into a hut, like a little mud hut, and she sits down and she gets out all her stuff, and all these women and children start lining up. And she's got this guy that's translating from Sena into English, and the impromptu medical clinic begins. And I saw everything. AIDS, malaria, kwashiorkor, malnutrition, protein deficiencies, scabies, infections, burns. I mean, I'm just sitting there watching this, it's not like they have some, privacy form, that everybody's got to fill out or anything. Yeah. I'm just, watching all these people come through, and with the supplies that she had and with the knowledge she had, she would do as much as she could to help them. And I swear, if she'd sat there for 4 days straight, that line around the hut would have been, coming and coming and coming for 4 days. It was like this inexhaustible supply of need. And so, that was quite an experience. Well, she died a little over a year ago. And I went to her funeral.
You went to Mozambique for it?
Oh, no. The funeral was in Iowa.
Oh.
She and her husband were from Iowa, and so they would spend a few months in Mozambique, and then they'd come back home. They'd kind of go back and forth. And she got sick, and they came home, and she'd actually. We knew this could be coming. In fact, I remember a conversation with her because, she'd had some surgeries, and it looked like the problems were taken care of, but everybody knew it could come back, and it did, and, so, but, I'm at her funeral, and at the end of the service, they had kind of like this open mic where people could talk about, tell stories or whatever.
Yeah.
And, just one after another, after another, after another. And it was amazing. And Robin was a hero.
So do you feel that the people that are really the heroes are the people that reach out and help others? Those people that basically want to make a difference in the world and the lives of people that God places on their path?
Yeah. And, You know, everybody's got a different kind of opportunity to be a hero.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think everybody's supposed to go to Mozambique.
Mm-hmm.
You know? It'd be nice if more people did.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. I mean, I've got a friend who she was on that trip, and she was just like me. She was just a visitor who wanted to go see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But she decided to go back and live there, and she is living there now.
Wow.
And that's how she that's her calling.
Mm-hmm.
It's always, and really for a long time, I want to say for almost 20 years, it's been my feeling that it's my job to be a regular business guy,
mm-hmm.
to be interested and involved and supportive of things like that,
mm-hmm.
and to tell other people what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like any other marketing problem where in the world of, you know, inventors and inventions and new technologies and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the guy that can invent the better mousetrap is often not the person who's talented at telling the world about it.
Mm-hmm. Boy, that's so
and,
true.
you know, the world doesn't beat a path to his door unless he figures out how to be the marketer of the mousetrap. Well, you know, that's also true of people who go do good things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my friend Janine, who decided to go live in Mozambique, does she have any particular fundraising skill or communication skill or letter writing skill or ability to make TV commercials about all the stuff she's doing?
Mm-hmm.
No. She's just doing, she's just using her talent.
Mm-hmm.
And she's exercising it to the best of her ability. But,
mm-hmm.
you know, everybody has talents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Children's Relief, the organization that's sending Janine or sent Robin over there, well, you know, I'm helping them out.
Mm-hmm.
I can help them communicate better, and
mm-hmm.
I can help them raise funds better, and
mm-hmm.
I can help them find people to sponsor children and stuff
mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
That's my skill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then, well, every year or two, I can get on a plane, I can go over there and be reminded that I got the easy job.
Yeah.
And really, it's true. You know,
mm-hmm.
I kind of joked that it's like, well, you know, in the next life, it's going to be me doing the work, and they're going to be doing the fundraising.
Well, maybe so. You know, there's so many people out there that, you know, say, look at the great things I'm doing for God, but yet they don't look around in their own families and in their own community and see what God's already doing and join in what He's already doing. I know that's what Jesus did. He said, I do the work of my Father. It's important to just look at your family and your friends and the people in your community that you're involved with. That's, I think, where the hardest work is ever done, because that's where our greatest joys and happinesses come from, or our
right.
greatest sorrows.
Charity begins at home.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Well, I know that you're making a difference, you're making a world a better place by just the things that you've shared with us so far. Do you have any good solutions to the problems facing society, especially racism, child and spousal abuse, and violence among young people?
Racism, spouse abuse, what was the third one?
Violence among young people.
Well, this gets me into another story, but, you know, this is actually turning out to be a very interesting interview. I didn't realize we were going to get into all this stuff. A long time ago, way before we had kids, Laura, my wife, one day she mentions to me something like, you know, someday I think we should have foster kids. And I look at her like, you want to do what? Like this is totally out of left field, and like this is something I would never think about. Like, because when you say foster kids, the first thing I think of is, okay, somebody's going to come live with you for a few months or a few years, and then they're going to just leave, and you're never going to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's too hard. You know,
yeah. Well,
especially after you get to like them, and
mm-hmm.
you know, you have a relationship with them, and then they're just going to get sent off somewhere. So that was like really foreign. Well,
mm-hmm.
it took a long time, but she slowly warmed me up to this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And after our oldest was born, we decided to take a foster baby for a few months as like we would be interim solution just for a little while, and we would sort of stick our toe in the water. So like everybody knows that this is not going to last very long, and you know, this is just a temporary situation. We're just going to try this out.
Mm-hmm.
So sure enough, one day, the agency, you know, has a baby girl named Drea. You want her? Well, okay. Yeah, we'll take her. So I come home from work, and we got this little black baby from the west side of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so while she was living for us, I felt like a glorified babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's like, this is just temporary. I'm not getting attached to her. Laura is, but I'm not, you know, that kind of thing. And mostly, as far as I was concerned, it was just a lot of work.
Yeah.
With our other kids, Laura nursed them, but you don't nurse a foster baby, so that means guess who gets to get up in the middle of the night and get the bottle?
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of not liking this, you know. And I'm muttering to myself, you know, well, you know, how come Drea's mother's got to be into drugs and all this stuff and can't take care of her, and how come this and how come that, and you know, so I'm being kind of gripey about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, finally we get another phone call, and Drea's grandmother's gonna take her in, and so they don't need us to be doing this anymore. So 2.5 months later, you know, Drea disappears, and I kind of figured that we would never see her again.
Mm-hmm.
Laura's kind of depressed. I was probably a little relieved. I'm just being honest with you.
Oh, I know. Well, I grew up taking care of foster kids. My mom was a nurse, and so we took the most severely damaged children into our home, and I had to change diapers and do the same thing we did, but at an early age.
Wow.
So I know what you're talking about.
Interesting. Well, so we thought that was the end of things. Well, a couple weeks later, we get this phone call again. And it's the caseworker, and he says, hey, Drea's grandmother wants to know if you would like to be her godparents.
Wow.
Now, like, she didn't know anything about us.
Mm-hmm.
But she decided, you know, if we go, well, sure. Okay, that sounds good. That, you know, that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been anybody's godparents before. Like, that's not a tradition in our family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the godparent thing, that was like, other people do that, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we truck on over to the Old Ship of Zion Church of God in Christ on the west side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. You know, and we're the only white people there.
Wow.
Which, I got to explain something about Chicago, is there's a lot of racism in Chicago,
mm-hmm.
and it's all kind of under the surface.
Yeah.
It's kind of an icy, nobody talks about it kind of a racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of discovered this, when we first moved here 12 or 13 years ago. It just seemed really hard to make friends with black people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
I later came to understand there's a lot of good reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's an unbelievable amount of discrimination that goes on in jobs and in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was a manufacturer's rep, selling stuff to manufacturing companies in Chicago,
mm-hmm.
I want to say in 2 years, except for an automotive plant and a steel mill, I'm not sure I ever met an African American person who was in a management position.
Really?
I'm not sure I ever, maybe somewhere.
Mm.
But really, seriously, in Chicago, it's like black people get the crummy jobs and white people get the good jobs.
Really?
And, yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and white people are oblivious to this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They just don't know what's going on. They just, probably mostly don't ever even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what I'm saying is, there's always been this kind of icy feeling that I always got around black people, like they don't really want to talk to me, and it's not like they'd be mean or rude.
Mm-hmm.
It was just not interested, don't bother, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was it immediately became apparent that whatever racial barriers there were with most people did not apply to us with Drea's grandma and her family.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, and this was 7 years ago, ever since then, and I see them every week,
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're their white cousins from the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And there are black cousins in Chicago, and whether somebody's white or black or whatever doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a non-issue.
Yeah.
And it's not like there aren't differences. It's not like we don't joke about them or talk about them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Of course their culture is different. Mm-hmm. It's completely different.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's okay. That's, we're all people.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I definitely learned that if people do things like take in foster children,
mm-hmm.
that can break down racial barriers.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned violence. Well, there's a lot of violence in the inner city, and I think, Drea's got 3 brothers, and they're all older than her, and
mm-hmm.
One of them's 13, and he's kind of getting into that teenager zone where, you're just sort of hoping that,
yeah.
he stays on track, and
mm-hmm.
I kind of look at it like I can't fix all his problems, and I can't solve all the problems that you have when you live in the inner city and all that.
Yeah.
But I can be a steady, unwavering person in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be an example of, not every guy is hanging out on the street corner or doing whatever people do in the inner city.
Yeah.
I think in the long run that'll make a difference for him in the direction that he goes. So I can't solve every problem, but I can do what I can do.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that the way that we can change a lot of problems in society is being a good role model for others and also being involved in their lives as a source of support, inspiration, and just an example of integrity and just doing the right thing? As you said earlier, is the definition of heroes is doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's just, that seems to be a common theme of all the heroes interviews that I've done. A lot of the different heroes had wishes for the world in their life. If you had 3 wishes that would come true for the world and for your life, what would they be? I know you already expressed 1 wish. I'm going to give you 2 more.
2 more. Boy, that's a tricky one.
Well, here's one suggestion. One person asked for an infinite number of wishes.
I don't think it works that way.
But I'm only giving you 2.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how I want to put this, but maybe one way to put it would be, I would wish that everybody would have the persistence and the opportunity to discover that God really does hear when we pray. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I think that whole idea and that whole personal experience of spirituality is really at the root of a lot of things, including people who insist that, there is no God, all this stuff is made up, it's a big fantasy, or it's a big fairy tale. I think at the root of that is usually some kind of a personal experience, like, well, I tried praying and I was in a hard time and my prayers just bounced off the ceiling.
Yeah.
And hey, I know what that feels like. I do. I think all of us do. Yeah. But I think one thing that I consider to be self-evident, needing no further proof or discussion is I do not judge God. God judges me. I think there's a world of difference between believing that the world is a senseless, crazy place and believing that there ultimately is some order to everything. And I guess if I had another wish, maybe one of those wishes might be that every kid could grow up in a family that's kind of like my parents, where even though everything was really tough and really brutal and really awful, that they stick together and they stick together anyway.
Yeah.
And again, that heroism, at the time, I did not look at my dad as a hero. It was just, to me, it was like one of these it was like a stubborn policy he had that I wasn't sure I agreed with. Okay, it was only later that I realized that was a heroic choice. Because for a little while anyway, it would have been much easier for him to renege on his commitments.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, how's that for a couple of wishes?
Well, those are good wishes, and I understand what you're talking about, that trusting in God and leaning not on your own understanding and acknowledging Him in all your ways and letting Him direct your path, that takes a tremendous amount of faith, and looking to see what He's doing in your life and the people around you. That's probably one of the hardest things in the world to do, is to let Him direct your path, and just having that faith and seeing everything as a part of His plan for you, and more importantly, a plan for everybody in the entire world, because nothing can happen to you that doesn't affect everybody else. And so I really agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
That's true.
Yeah.
And the butterfly effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a term that a guy came up with in the 1960s at MIT who was studying weather, and he discovered that, literally when he was trying to plug all this stuff into a computer and predict weather patterns, he discovered that the tiniest little change could potentially cause an enormous change somewhere else. Like the wings of a butterfly here could cause a hurricane there 6 months later. Mm-hmm. And there was literally no way to know. There was no way to, to track all the cause and effects down to the granular level, but that's how nature really works. And, I think when you make a right choice or a wrong choice, mm-hmm. you do the right thing, you decide to be a hero even though nobody's paying attention, or you not to, same thing. Same thing. And you just never know. And you don't have to. I think the point of it all is you don't have to know how things are going to turn out. You trust that there's a plan, mm-hmm. and you do the right thing in the interim simply because it's the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think about the In Search of Heroes program and its impact on youth, parents, and business people?
Well, I think if you're asking these kind of probing questions of business people, and they're usually not ever asked, mm-hmm. You're certainly bringing out a whole dimension in business. You're trying to create some airtime so younger people are hearing from business people and different leaders, and getting the inside story. And I think if the inside story gets heard, that can only help.
Well, the good thing about these questions in the Heroes program is that it's based on the philosophy of Earl Nightingale and his program, The Strangest Secret of the Mind of Man, and the realization that people will only achieve the level of success that they desire until they actually become the type of person that has excellence and integrity and is providing a service to humanity that is worth the financial gain that they desire. And by letting people listen to these individuals like yourself that are very successful in the business world, and learning from listening to the interviews of what type of people that you've become and what you think about and how your mind works, especially in those areas of difficult problems, that's going to give them the role models that they need to basically become the type of people that will allow them to achieve the level of success that they desire, but it's going to be a lasting success. It's sort of like what you were talking earlier about, is those people that take the shortcut, that everything is expedient, rather those people like yourself that do the right thing when nobody's looking, that provide quality service, that are always seeking to provide a service that goes above and beyond everybody's expectations. If that's the true model for success, and not just in personal life and financial life, but in every area of life.
Well, it is. I think it is possible to be successful in a whole bunch of areas of life. I think a lot of people have this idea like, well, I could be successful in business, or I could help poor kids somewhere, or I could do all this, but I couldn't be successful in all the spheres. Well, you certainly can't do everything. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think you can be successful in a whole, mm-hmm. in all the arenas of your life, at least in some measure. Mm-hmm. It's not like I have to be a loser in this department and a winner in this other department.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think of the things that parents can do that will help their children realize that they too can be heroes and make a positive impact on the lives of others?
Well, I think it starts with taking responsibility to be a hero yourself. There's the old phrase, what you do speaks so loudly, what you say I cannot hear. And so, we're not perfect, and we don't have it all figured out, but we can do what we know we need to do. And sometimes when those tough decisions come along, our kids need to see us make the tough decision and do the right thing and not take the easy way out.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but another thing, since we're talking about spiritual values and stuff, or you talked about Earl Nightingale, mm-hmm. I I think the best success manual for a business person is the book of Proverbs in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think that there is more useful, practical wisdom about how to deal with other people and the kinds of people that you deal with
Mm-hmm.
in Proverbs than like just about any other place that I could name. Like I know, every entrepreneur kind of has his list of books that had a big impact on him.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that one would be right on the top of the list.
Me too.
And what is Proverbs about? It's about all of the fundamental differences between wise people and fools.
Boy, that's true.
And I don't know of any other kind of discernment you could have that would be more valuable than being able to go into a crowd and start having conversations and start working with people and quickly figure out who's wise and who's foolish,
Mm-hmm.
and who's honest and who's not.
Yeah.
The category, the way that you learn to frame the world from that book is absolutely priceless.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fully appreciate it until you really read through it a couple times, and it's not one of those books where you like sit down and you could read the whole thing probably in an hour,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not how you read it.
Yeah.
I think my favorite way to read it is there's 31 chapters. You just read one a day.
Mm-hmm.
If today is the 21st, you read the 21st chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got something for you.
Yeah. Yep. And it always seems to have different information every time you read it, depending upon what's going on in your life at that day.
Right.
Well, Perry, I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and thank you for just sharing all the things that you did. It's truly profound, the information that you've provided. And is there some parting information that you'd like to share with the young people listening to this interview?
Well, pursue wisdom. It's an elusive thing, but it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, Proverbs I think is a great place. Be a hero in whatever circumstances you're in and whatever skills you got, whatever they are. There's a way that you can harness those and be successful and do the things that are going to be important to you in your life. And I think life is just a process of discovering what that is.